Thank you everybody for coming. Afternoon. Welcome to the meeting of the Licensing and Safety Subcommittee. It has turned past 12:30 now, so we can make a start. My name is Graham White. I'm a solicitor for Shropshire Council and the legal advisor to the committee this afternoon. I should inform everybody that the meeting is being live streamed and it's also being recorded, and a video and audio of the meeting and the papers shown. The papers are publicly available on the council's website after the hearing. Just when I finish speaking, I'll ask the members of the committee, the officers present, and anybody who's going to be making representations today to introduce themselves. And everybody that does speak is asked to introduce themselves each time they speak, so everybody who's listening to the recording knows who's speaking. And to ensure that anybody watching on the live stream can hear, please turn on the microphone before you speak as well. The button on the right will turn it on, and when you finish speaking, the button on the right again will turn it off. So first of all, I'll ask the members to introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Isherwood.
Yeah, Mike Isherwood, councillor for Oswestry West.
Nigel Lumbey, councillor for All Brighton.
Edward Towers, councillor for the Wen division.
And then we've got Mr. O'Neill, many of you will.
Yeah, licensed officer Ross Owen.
And Mr. Ward at the end, who's the committee officer for the meeting today. And then if we can go around the room as well and just ask whoever's present and actually making representations to identify themselves as well. So we've got a record. With that, do we just start off over here?
I'm Matthew Cruz. I'm here for Land Waterline Community Trust.
Steve Nola, the Lavelle Design Community Trust.
Gail Nola, on behalf of the Management Committee.
Zoe Cruz is a resident of Land Waterline and a member of the Management Committee.
Ray Lloyd, Laverne Parish Council.
And over here, please.
I'm Michael Tree. I'm a resident of Llanfair Waterdown.
Desmond Allison with Giselle Allison, residents of Llanfair Waterdown. We live at Buckley.
Thank you very much. Right, now the first item on the agenda is the election of chairman. So I'll ask the members to nominations for chairman, please.
Nominate Councillor Lumbey.
Sorry, I'll second that.
I'll nominate Councillor Lumbey as the chair.
Thank you very much.
Second it.
Thank you, Councillor Lumbey. Over to you.
The committee has read and considered the representations and evidence submitted by all parties in relation to the application. Therefore, presentations should be succinct and kept to a brief summary of key points. There is no need to read out written representations or reiterate the details of written representations at great length. The chair will intervene if it is felt that presentations are becoming overly long and going off track or do not relate to the application being considered. The procedure for the hearing has been sent to you prior to the hearing. In general, we will aim to keep to this order of business to ensure the timely and fair conduct of the hearing for all parties. If it is felt necessary during the course of the hearing, the committee may make the decision to deviate from the procedure. This is at the committee's discretion. There are opportunities throughout the hearing for each party to ask questions of the others following their presentations. Please ensure that you use this opportunity to ask questions only and not to make any further points or statements. It is for the chair to decide if questions are appropriate and relate to the matter in hand. Any behaviour considered to be disruptive by the chair may lead to parties being muted or asked to leave the hearing. Does anybody have any questions regarding the hearing process or how the hearing will be conducted?
Also on behalf of Mr. Tree here, it's not so much a question as a comment. We received a voluminous amount of documentation 24 hours ago, and before coming there was serious discussion about requesting an adjournment. We've decided that would be counterproductive, perhaps even silly. and that we are not doing it. But we would ask that you bear in mind that we have had a lot of material not presented at the meeting, but immediately prior to it, and have not really had time to assimilate that fully. Anything irrelevant or now irrelevant in our presentations, that should be borne in mind. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I do appreciate that you haven't asked for an adjournment, and we will consider in relation to that.
Thank you.
So to the licence officer, have any of the representations made been withdrawn?
No, Chair, all representations remain.
So would any of the parties present like to withdraw their representations? So that's a no. Does any party have any evidence not already submitted which they would like to put forward for consideration? Please be aware that this can only be done with the agreement of all the other parties present and the subcommittee, and may necessitate the hearing being adjourned so that it can be properly considered by all parties and the subcommittee. No? Good. So this is for us really. Members are reminded to disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed which is not included in the register of interests. If, following the declaration of an interest, any party feels a member's decision-making may be prejudiced, they should make it known. The hearing may then need to be adjourned so that the committee can be appointed. Any?
I have not.
Okay, thank you. So can the licence officer introduce themselves and present their report then, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Public Protection Officer Ross O'Neill, working within the licensing team and responsible for today's report. So you're here today to consider a full variation application for the Community Pavilion and Landfair Waterdyne. It's been applied for by Landfair Waterdyne Community Trust. Appendix A and B of my report, you'll find a map and photographs to help you set the scene. The premises is set within the rural village of Landfair Waterdyne, South Shropshire, on the Welsh border, and the premises currently has a premises licence to supply of alcohol from noon until 10:30, Monday to Sunday, for on sales only, within the pavilion and on the outside terrace. They also have exhibition of films for indoor use only, Monday to Sunday, 8 to 11 o'clock at night. Appendix C and D of my report are the current licence and current plan. So today's application is to extend the opening hours and supply of alcohol by 1.5 hours daily, add off sales to enable customers to consume in the surrounding lawns, and remove all Annex 3 conditions from the current licence. The condition the applicant has also requested to remove is paragraph in 6.4 of my report. So you can see on the report all the conditions in that annexes they want to remove. And they've also asked to replace with conditions as a 6.5 of my report. So just to clarify, 6.4 is the conditions they want to remove. 6.5 of the report is ones to replace. Appendix E and F of the application are the proposed plan and the application in full for you to look at and consider. So during consultation, representations were received of 6 other persons against the applicant. Although not entirely linked to the 4 licence objectives, there is concern of noise, management of the lawned area and off-sale consumption in open areas. The representations have all been given the benefit of the doubt as per the 182 guidance to allow amplification of their concerns today. So Appendix G is a location map and Appendix H 1 to 6 are the representations applications. We've also received 15 supporting representations during consultation. They believe the applicant is positive for the community and they can be found at Appendix I and they're 1 to 15. Additional items were received of the applicant during the 20 working days. These are available on the agenda as obviously we've already mentioned. So to clarify, the application is to 1, extend the hours, 2, to add off sales, and 3, to remove all Annex 3 conditions. So the reason you're here today is to consider and determine the application. To do this, you must give appropriate weight to the steps that are necessary to promote the 4 licence objectives, any representations and support information, the 182 guidance, and of the Licence Act 2003, Shropshire Council's licensing policy 2019 to 2024. You then may refuse to grant the application or grant the application with or without conditions in full or in part. And your decision must be justified and provide support and evidence after to all persons involved. The decision can be appealed within 21 days of persons receiving that notice. That's it for me, Chair, for now.
Thank you, Ross. You'll now have an opportunity to ask any relevant questions of the licensed officer. The order I will take these questions will be other persons, the applicant, and then the committee. So, other persons?
Yes, please. Desmond Ellison. We had understood from some of the recent material that at least one of the Annex 3 conditions was to be reinstated in the light of the report from the Environment Officer, who has made no mention of this. I see a nod across the table confirming that we may in fact be correct about that.
Yeah, apologies. Paragraph 7, so 7.1 of the report details the environmental protections concerns in relation to noise nuisance and their conditions that have been agreed. So there's 3 conditions there that have been agreed. So 7.1 of the application, they're the conditions that have been agreed by environmental protection with the applicant. Environmental protection and withdrew their representations and are not present today. Apologies.
Could I request that you read those out because we don't have the document to refer to, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
The environmental protection were concerned about the noise nuisance as the building in premises is a very rural location with low background noise levels. Noise from both music and people can travel a considerable distance, and he noted that there are a number of properties in the vicinity, the closest property being approximately 80 metres away. In order to ensure that there is no noise breakout for the building in premises likely to cause a public nuisance, the following conditions were requested. So the first one was to retain a condition. Prominent, clear and legible notices will be displayed at all exits, requesting the public respect the needs of nearby residents and to leave the area quietly. Number 2, windows and doors shall be kept closed between 21:30 and 0800 except for access and egress. And condition 3, the outside area, brackets, which includes the bowls and lawn area, close bracket, shall be cleared of all patrons by 2300 and remain clear until the end of trading.
Mr. Allison?
Thank you. Yes, I do have other questions. Firstly, is there a legal requirement for someone with a personal licence to be present during licensed activities? And if not, who is responsible at any one time?
There's no legal requirement. There is on this licence, their Annex 3 is currently that they have to have a named personal licence holder. The deregulation back for village premises, community premises allowed premises to have the committee or the trustee to be the DPS. So the majority of licences have the committee or trustee responsible, but in this one, there is conditions in that Annex 3 that were put on by the subcommittee previously to say that a licence holder must be present, yes.
Okay, thank you. I believe you said there were 15 representations received in support. Was that during the consultation period or after it?
They're all received during. Anything that has to come in within the 28-day consultation. If someone doesn't put representations in during that time, they won't be accepted.
Thank you. I believe from section 8.5 in your reports that you have spoken to or communicated with the applicants about the possibilities of negotiation and mediation. Can I ask if you are aware that no attempt was made by the applicant to consult with us during or after the 28-day consultation period until the 11th of February when we received their first response to our notification?
Yeah, no, that's noted. Like I say, that's during my job is to take applications in, representations come in to support against. I do emails, phone calls, speak to as many people as I can involve. So that paragraph is obviously to say that I try and encourage, speak to people, and obviously impartial to it all. So I try and advise everyone as necessary and as best I can.
Fully understood and appreciated. The point being that the paragraph goes on to say that the representations have been sustained or maintained, and in the absence of any negotiation, that's perhaps, sorry, I'm making a comment. I should be asking questions. I think that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you very much. The applicant?
I have no questions. No questions. Thank you.
No more questions, no? Okay. And the committee then?
I have no questions at this stage.
No questions of the officer, no.
I've got one question in relation to the amended request for the Bulls area to be included as on licence. Is that doable, or is there an option that we can perhaps consider instead of it being an on licence? And we've already got what the on licence is defined as. Can we amend that without consultation?
Chair, the original plan shows the red line, the hall and the terrace. That's the on sales licensable area. So what the applicants applied for is not an extension of that. So if that red line is to get extended, that would need to have to go back to consultation. So the applicant will need to withdraw it, because obviously the extension of that red line would allow for recorded music and the bar to get extended further out. In relation to the off sales, which is what they've applied for, if the plan was to have a separate segregated area, say a blue section which was hatched for consumption only, then that could possibly be considered today by yourselves, but you'd also have to consider a condition on the licence to do with that consumption linking back to a plan with a key, because obviously officers would need to police it. So if we were to get complaints, we would obviously need to go down to there to have a look at the plan to see what's on the plan. So to answer the question, you can't extend the red line because that's what they've applied for, but because they've applied for off sales, which obviously would take place wherever, yes, if they want to reduce that and it's agreed, then they could have a separate coloured hatch plan with a new condition on the licence for the consumption to be retained in a certain area. If that makes sense.
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, sorry.
Yeah, go on then. I will allow it.
Thank you. We had perhaps wrongly thought that the off licence was being superseded by a new option which was in the latest material. If we are still asking questions about off licences, I had another question for Mr. O'Neill.
Okay then.
What basically?
Yes.
Thank you. What does granting an off licence entail, and in particular, are any responsible authorities involved in this?
The application is for off sales, so all the responsible authorities have had the applications. They've all been consulted. The discussion I've just been having with the chair is the option of amending the application. And when we talk about amending the application, we can't go bigger or ask for more. But what the applicant has suggested is that if there's concerns about off sales in general, so I go and buy alcohol at a hamper, Christmas fair, or the village hall, I take a bottle of wine away with me, that's off sales, I could take it home.
Yeah.
If that is then on the plan to show a consumption area for off sales only, then the applicant is suggesting that they will police that area only, and then I couldn't take that alcohol away with me. Hence, we need a condition. So the original application has been consulted with everyone. Everyone's had the ability to see it, and then the new report that's been submitted 2 days ago has a plan, kind of a plan B from the applicant. And I'm just explaining to the committee what they could and what they can't do. What they can't do is extend that red line, because that's the licensable area, and that would need to go out to all the authorities to consider, because the red line with on sales allows consumption as well. So if they were to extend the red line and then say we'll get rid of off sales because we've extended the red line, that cannot be considered by the subcommittee. So that would need to be a different application, because the on sales would then allow people to drink inside the premises, but the bowls court and any lawned area would also allow recorded music because of the deregulation under the Licence Act, plus an outdoor bar, which can take place at the terrace. It could take place even further. So it could be a hindrance on yourselves or more a noise nuisance, hence we'd have to go back to environmental protection to consider. That makes a bit of sense.
Does that make sense?
Mr. Allison, if I could just,
Sorry.
My understanding of it, which may be helpful,
Please.
is if you consult for the off licence for that much, and now you only want to do that much, you haven't got to reconsult because the consultees have considered that much.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Thank you. So would the restriction of the off licence area be part of the terms of the off licence?
It wouldn't be an off light, it'd be off sales. So the sales would have to take place in the red section, which is the hall and the terrace. So the bar can be in the hall or the terrace. And then at the minute, persons can only consume on the premises, i.e. the red section.
Understood. Yes.
If they have off sales on the licence, which they've applied for on the original application, anyone could then take that drink off the premises and consume it. So that's the bowls area, that's the lawn area, that's taking it back home with them. If they say we want off sales, because they can't say we want to extend the landfill and not have it, they have off sales, but on the plan, they then have a hatched area for consumption only. We'd have to have that on the plan, and we'd have to have a licensing condition to go with it. So then it could be policed. So then they, as the license holder, are saying we want to sell alcohol here, but we won't allow people to drink it here and here, nowhere else.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think I now understand. Thank you very much.
The off sale section is just like I say, it's where the alcohol be sold is the appropriation of alcohol, and then where it's consumed isn't the licensable activity, but it allows people at the minute they're restricted on where people can go. Hence, they can only stand on the terrace or inside, and no drinks can leave that premises.
So this would be a means of extending the possibility of consuming alcohol down onto the ball court, but not all over the place.
Yes,
And
depending on
off sales with that condition is distinct from an off license. These are two different things.
it's to do with the appropriation. The appropriation takes place in the village hall. So if an off license, you appropriate the alcohol in the village hall or the terrace, and then at the minute they can only drink it in there because they've only got on sales for that section. But the off sales on the application would allow that consumption to take place anywhere off the premises. So if they restrict it to the bowls area only, and we've got a plan that's 10 metres by 20 metres, and they're going to define that area, and we've got a condition, officers could then police that, and it would be a legal requirement because it would be a licensing condition. Thank you.
So that's not the application at the moment, but that could be a condition that we put on it. That's right.
Yes, so that could a condition, something like off sales, and I've scribbled something down. Off sales will be restricted to the blue hatch line of the plan as per key, and then obviously a plan would have to marry up to that. So me as an officer, I would need to, we're not talking about next week, I'm talking about in 10 years' time, that an officer picks up a complaint from a member of the public, and then they have to print the plan off and the licence. They need to marry up. An officer needs to have the basics.
Yep.
And if they don't, and they look at it and they go, it doesn't make sense, then obviously they're not going to be able to look at a prosecution or enforce anything. So it needs to be a good condition and a good plan to show it. So if you as committee members went down to that premises, you should be able to look at that plan and go, that area is that person standing in that area, I've just seen him buy a pint and walk into that field, that's not within that area. But as what they've applied for at the minute is for consumption, full stop off sales, which allows off the premises full stop.
Okay, Ross, thank you. So the applicant then, if you want to present your application, then thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon all. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present the application and to summarise the objectives of the full variation. So firstly, to give some background to the current situation and history of the premises. Since the award of the premises licence in 2021, a management committee has been installed to help with the running of the facility. This has been proven as beneficial, aiding the trust with the operation of the premises. The management committee and Land and Waterline Community Trust have adhered to all licence conditions set out by the subcommittee since opening. This suitably has been summarised in the supporting document under item 3. The aim of the full variation has been driven by feedback from attendees, the management committee and the community trust assessment of the general running of the facility over the last 18 months. Although the community have a licensed venue at the Everest Hall, which allows usage 7 days a week from 8 AM to 1 AM, it was identified that the pavilion setting and adjoining field was more conducive to the type of social events that the community was looking for. It was determined that there is a place in the community for both facilities as their objectives and designs differ. We fully appreciate there have been representations made in regards to the variation, both in support and in opposition. Everyone is entitled to their opinion and feedback is always valued. The Trust have reviewed the representations and replied by email and letter to the persons concerned. In addition to this, the Parish Council held a public meeting to discuss the variation, and only the Land and Waterline Community Trust and 2 parishioners attended, one of which is actually the next door neighbour to the pavilion, who is in full support of the application, as there have been no issues since opening in their opinion. This would have been a perfect forum to discuss concerns amongst the parish and for the Land and Waterline Community Trust to respond to any queries or questions on the application. Sadly, none of the persons with representations against attended or sent any correspondence to the clerk. Although this is obviously not an issue, only one person who had representations against the variation has actually ever attended the pavilion. And therefore, it's been difficult for us to understand how the management of a venue can be questioned when it's never been experienced. For reference, a signature sheet has been placed in the pavilion as a show of support for what we're applying for, and 61 people have signed this over 2 social evenings. Some other signatures have been received from people who couldn't make the events but wanted to show their support. So now on to why we want to amend or vary the licence. The effective management and running of the premises since opening in July 2021 has identified some key areas that will make the running of the premises easier for the volunteers on the Trust and the Management Committee. We would like to remove the majority of Annex 3 conditions not shared by similar venues locally, excluding the recommendation of the maintenance of closing of windows and doors and additional sort of stipulations made by Rob Boland. We'd like to align the opening times of the venue to enable the pavilion to be more flexible with events and limit the number of TENS licences we need to apply for. This at the moment is at the cost of the Trust, where funds could be utilised elsewhere for grants and the general benefit of the parish. It also aligns with the opening hours and licensable hours for most local venues, shared by similar venues, even in the village. We've also applied to update the venue's licence to have off sales, as this is the most manageable alteration to the licensable area and one we can continue to successfully manage. We've already discussed adding signage to the play park and car park to continue to advise attendees not to take alcohol past certain points. This has worked to date, and as most attendees are local or known to us, it's an easy way of managing potential issues. On the point of complaints received since opening, no complaints have been escalated to Shropshire Council. The complaints feedback we have received as a trust have been within the first 3 months of operation, where teething issues are expected. The complaints have been isolated to 2 residents in the village, and the view is not one that's consistent throughout the parish of over 100 households. Since the 17th of September 2021, we've received no complaints or had any negative feedback, further proving that when issues are raised, we are proactive in dealing with any raised concerns. The main reason, as mentioned for the variation, is for ease of running of a voluntary organisation and premises. This will enable the longevity of the premises and continue to provide a place to meet for an isolated community. This will align to existing premises in the parish and environs, and we feel it is only fair given that we have proven effective management of the venue and adherence to the current licence. We're happy to proceed with any questions or queries the subcommittee and attendees have. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now have an opportunity to ask any relevant questions of the applicant. The order I'll take the questions in will be the licensing officer, other persons, and then the committee. So to you, Rob.
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rather a lot of questions. I think the first one arising from what you said is, do you have the impression that we think that the events over the last 2 years have been badly managed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's sort of a varying of opinion in that. I think in some ways we feel as though maybe we're under a lot more scrutiny than other organisations, which obviously when we first opened we completely appreciate that because we were a new premises in the area. So obviously there's going to be more eyes watching it because it's not something that's been run for a long period of time. So I think the general feel for the Trust and Management Committee is more so that we're worried about everything that we do because of sort of the volume of complaints there were with the initial application. So it's not so much that we feel that maybe yourselves think we're poorly managing events, but it's more so that we're just mindful that the amount of sort of noise and emails and representations against from the original application have meant that we feel under probably more scrutiny. So it's probably more something that we feel based on feedback that we've had. Steve, I don't know if you...
Yeah, no, I'm completely agree with that. That's what our feelings are. We're concerned we don't want to offend the people in the village and the neighbours, and so we're trying to organise events to work with that, so we're just not sure where we can go with it, really.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Olsen.
Thank you. I'm afraid I have rather a lot of questions, partly because from our point of view we received so little information. If I could be allowed one comment, we thought that the procedure for any sort of negotiation, as announced on the Blue Public Notice, was that things would be communicated to and through the licensing authority, which is what we tried to do. We didn't realise that there was an expectation that things be done in some sort of public forum to which we might have been called. I'll say more about that when I speak, but I would like to be clear that we thought we were following the proper procedure that had been initiated by the first word we had about this application, the blue public notice. And it seems that each side has been thinking of or following a completely different procedure, which might explain why there was absolutely no contact.
Perhaps the licensing officer can come back on that.
Yeah, Chair, just so obviously the comments made there by the applicant that I've said at meetings, there's nothing to suggest that anyone has to go to the meeting. So you followed the procedure, you've had all the information, as everyone said, you followed the Licence Act. Anything else outside of it, there's nothing to say they have to post you letters to say they're having the application. It has to go on the site notice, newspaper. That's the process. So you put representations in, you're here today.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, but that wasn't quite the point I was trying to make, which was that under your 8.5, there was provision for some sort of encouraging the applicant to work with the objectors on possible negotiation. And we had understood that any initiative of that kind would come through you, and nothing did come.
Every application is different. The representations get put in and then replies come back. It could be that the reply came back to you and you'd have thought, yes, actually now I'll put representations in, which isn't uncommon. People withdraw their representations. So we try and facilitate it by sending the emails out, by making phone calls and being open to the process.
Thank you. I'm getting distracted a little there. Can I come to the rather long list of questions that I have? First of all, I believe you will have read our written representation. It lists 4 assumptions. Are you challenging any of the first 3 assumptions there? If you need a quick reminder, one is the non-profit charity aiming to serve the local community, not a business aiming to maximise returns. 2 was that nearby village residents form part of the community, and I might elaborate on that. Nearby village residents who may not take part in your social activities also form part of the community. And thirdly was that any agreed licence change would be taken up in a revised hire agreement. Do you challenge any of those assumptions, or are they substantially correct?
I think probably to feedback on that. So where it says the community trust is a non-profit charity aimed to serve the local community, okay, completely agree with that concept. However, obviously what we are mindful of is that any money that is generated for the trust is distributed back within the community, the parish and the environs for the general benefit of the community. So although it's not an aim to maximise profits, any profit that is made obviously is only going to benefit the community. So I think your point on it being not to maximise is fair, but any monies that we do make is only going to benefit the community. So that's probably a fair assumption in the way of we're not looking just to maximise profits. There's more to it than that. On probably the subject of nearby village residents form part of the community, absolutely. That's one thing that we have been and continue to be proactive in trying to take on feedback to enable not just say the people who live in the village, but the environs as well, the surrounding areas. So the pavilion itself obviously offers a place to meet for a lot of people in the community, a lot of people who live in isolated locations who do maybe monotonous or sort of work solely on their own, i.e. farming, things like that, where they don't get to see a huge number of people. So what we're trying to do is give them a premises where they can meet and they can benefit from. But to the point of nearby village residents form part of the community, absolutely. Any agreed changes to licensing hours and any other event condition will be taken up on a revised version of the present hire agreement. So we would have to adhere to the licensing conditions, whatever the event may be that's booked. So at the moment, the management committee have a booking form, and we ensure that whoever's booking the venue is aware of what the licensing conditions are, and we ensure that they stick to those conditions, hence why we've not broken any conditions since opening. And then licensed events open to extended outdoor space and later timings remain a serious threat to public nuisance. Well, on that point, we haven't had any sustained.
Sorry, I didn't ask you about that point.
Okay, sorry, I was just looking at the four assumptions that
I
I
asked about
listed.
the first three. I
Okay,
would not have expected you to concur with the fourth assumption. That was a different.
okay, apologies. No, I just
Not at all.
wanted to.
Mr. Allison, just listening to that, I'm sure it's a benefit to you to effectively interrogate the licensee as to how the property's being run. I'm not quite sure it adds value to us when we're trying to reason whether the application for an off licence and what we're trying to get to today. So I'm just saying, be a bit careful. Some of these questions I don't think necessarily relevant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have great difficulty over this because there are communication issues which go back a long way, which colour a lot of the things that are happening, which are not directly relevant, but which we think are indirectly relevant. We don't want to spend too much time on them either. We need to focus on the licensing objectives. I would agree with that. If I could turn to your application, would you agree to retract the unfortunate use of what we consider an inappropriate word, the word opposers, to refer to objectors in this application?
Yeah, I think so. It certainly wasn't intended to sound as derogatory or to paint you in a picture of you that you're the person here with pitchfork against what we're trying to do. It was probably just a poor use of language. There was no intent with that. So we can remove the word opposers. We just thought because you may be in opposition of the variation, it was probably just a poor choice of words. But yes, agreed.
Thank you very much, because there are important implications over attitudes, that it is possible to disagree on some of these things and not disagree on all of them. Again, I mustn't get onto the things I have to say, but a lot of what the pavilion is doing is not anything that we're casting questions or casting doubts upon. Could I ask, I'm going to ask some questions about the trust and the management committee membership, and this pertains to turnover of people over time, and that pertains to whether commitments made at one point in time are necessarily sustained later. I will try to be succinct. I've got a few points of fact, just to confirm that I've got them substantially right. None of the three trustees now in place are the same as when the licence was granted in January 2021.
No, that's correct.
Thank you. Of the 8 original management committee members from May 2021, only 3 are still members, I believe.
We'd have to confirm. I think it may be more than 3, but there's different people from the original, so that probably answers your question.
And at least 8 other people have come and gone. There has been a certain amount of turnover.
Yes, absolutely.
And that may even relate to some of the difficulties that you're talking about. In fact, I have to go back to the license application of January 2021. And in fact, I should be referring at times to Annex R in that application, because a lot of commitments or comments were made there. It was pointed out that there is a member with event experience and personal license, and that would mean that things were done well. Can you confirm this person is no longer on the management committee?
Sorry, can you just repeat the first part of that?
The individual who was singled out 2 years ago in the report from the applicant saying that they would have a management committee member with event experience as well as a personal licence. I'm referring to the parish councillor who for a time was on the management committee. He is no longer on the management committee as we understand it.
No, that's correct.
That's correct, thank you. Okay.
Mr. Allison, I've been listening to what you say, and if you're going to go back to the application for 2021 and dissect that,
no.
I'm not sure that's helpful for us as a committee. I get your overriding point is that what was then, and now you've got different staff who have now got responsibility for running it.
Right.
But we perhaps can say that a bit more.
I take a point. Apologies if I've been too verbose on the subject, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and encapsulate what I have to say when I make my presentation, and again without trying the committee's patience too much, I hope. If we can turn to the part 3 there now, sorry. The nature of the proposed variation as described. originally it was all Annex 3 conditions to be removed.
Yes.
At the time that was made, were you aware that you were removing a condition that had been agreed by the CT itself in the previous case?
So yeah, we're fully aware of what we were asking to remove. Obviously the Annex 3 conditions were added by the subcommittee on application of the original licence. So we fully understood why they were put in place. And that's why we've adhered to them for the last 18 months.
Right.
Now, obviously, the reason that we're applying to remove them is because we feel as though we've proven effective management of the premises. So the additional conditions that were added to ensure we sort of are managing it effectively, now we do not feel are actually necessary, and we should align more with other village halls and venues of sort of similar design and objective.
Could I ask what you see as similar design, given the very different structure of the pavilion, a wooden building on a large field, and the average village hall, which is probably a solid stone building somewhere, which is not immediately adjacent to a large open space?
Yeah, I think the way we're looking at it is that the pavilion is a venue within a community that is not dissimilar to a village hall. Obviously, we have an adjoining field, which is a community field. It's a public area available for uses by anyone who lives in the parish or anyone who visits the area. So obviously that field, although it is adjoining, can be used at any point, regardless of what event is booked in at the pavilion. So completely appreciate that maybe the visual aesthetics and things that adjoin to the premises maybe look slightly different, but the premises itself is not dissimilar to a village hall in its running. Okay, it's got an oak frame and it's got wooden cladding, so maybe it's not as soundproof as maybe the village hall, for instance. And that's the whole reason that we don't actually allow events that were going to cause significant noise. So we go through a process of assessing what applications or bookings are going to be made. If we feel that they're going to cause a nuisance, we decline them, or we suggest they use the Everest hall, which in some cases they have taken up the option to go to the Everest hall. So that is always in our mind.
Thank you. I think this may be relevant. You claim that all Annex 3 conditions were in place due to, let's say, objectors. Thank you for that. Prior to application. Are you aware of conditions 4, 5, 6 and 7? Would these not have arisen on account of concerns on the part of the licensing authority or some other authority? Did these conditions pertain to what objectors had to say at any time?
Sorry, just which ones do you say? 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, or 4, 5, 6?
4, 5, 6, and 7. That's obviously very important and time-consuming things to do with first aid, to do with fire evacuation. Important as these things are, I mean, your application says all these conditions arose due to objectors.
Well, okay, maybe there was some inaccuracy around that. It wasn't just from objectors, but what we're saying is those conditions were allocated during the original licence application. Right. What we're now saying is that the Annex 3 conditions, so the additional conditions, so we call them, we now no longer feel that we should have them in place because we've proven effective management of things like having someone first aid trained, fire safety trained, having a personal licence holder, things like that. They're kind of to aid the management of a new venue, I would say, because you've never proven effective running if it's new. Now we've proven effective running. These things come at a cost. They're actually putting people off wanting to volunteer and help, because the first thing that they're being told when they join is you've got to go through first aid training, fire safety training, which all comes at a cost. And although fully appreciate that they're important things, you know, first aid and fire safety, obviously it's paramount, but there's an element of common sense with this, that it's a voluntary organisation. Other very similar venues aren't asked to do this. We're very fortunate that we do have first aiders on committees anyway. I'm trained as a first aider in work anyway, so it's, you know, things like that, they do happen in public forums. But if we've had no issues of any first aid incidents, we've had no fire safety issues. Exactly. So I think it's more that we've proven effective management, so we just feel that they can be removed, and it's as simple as that.
On the basis that you are keeping condition 2, and we will have questions about condition 1, we don't dispute any of that. Okay. And rather than me rattling through a lot of questions here, can we agree that the events that you're running benefit a substantial part of the local community, a part that enjoys social events, brings together people from different aspects of the community, achieves some positive things in that regard, but that not everyone in the community chooses to participate in these events at this site. And so the claim to be benefiting the entire community, to be open to the entire community or indeed world is one thing, but to benefit the entire community is rather a strong claim. I think our position is, provided some of the community benefit and the rest of the community derive no harm, great. But there has to be a bit of a balance.
No, appreciate that, and I think what we're saying is general benefit. So obviously that's factoring in the whole community, so villages, parish and environs. So appreciate your feedback that not everyone wants to come, and that's fine. If that's not your cup of tea, then obviously no one will make anyone come. But one thing it's there for everyone and everyone is welcome. So that's probably our feedback on that, but appreciate what you're saying.
Thank you for that. And if I can try the chairman's patience just a little more, the 11 people who raised objections in January 2021 testified to some past events with massive amounts of noise, and they've been quite unhappy about it in their homes. So it's not trivial to be asking questions about, is this one group of people thinking about things in relation to another? This, I emphasise, was before the licence was granted. It was an event on the open field, and I'll have more to say about that later, but not much. You're looking for flexibility. A small question, but your new condition in MA is providing only for the management committee, whereas I think your previous conditions 4 to 6 said trustee stroke member of the management committee. We thought, well, it's your business, but if you had trustees, members of the management committee, you would have a wider pool of people to choose from. Nobody would be obliged to be part of that pool. Wouldn't you have more flexibility if you kept trustee stroke member of the management committee? Small question.
Can you just confirm MA for us?
We'd have to have your document, your application document in front of us, and it's roughly the section which says somebody has to be present unless it's a third party with personal licence, but it says now somebody from the management committee has to be present, whereas the previous condition 3 to 7 said a trustee or somebody from the management committee has to be
Mr. Anderson, if we can have clarity from the licence officer in relation to
Chair, it's 651 of the report. It's also of the applicant. It's the statement you put in the general box. So the management committee will ensure committee member is on site for licensed activities unless carried out by a third party with personal licence.
Okay, no, point taken. I think the reason is that the management committee are responsible. They're put in place to support the trust to manage the venue. So really quick background on the trust. We don't obviously just manage the pavilion. We've got land grants. There's quite a wide range of activities. So the management committee are there to support us in running the pavilion. So I think probably the reason we've said management committee is because they are the people who will likely run the event. So it
is your own business.
Yeah, but no, appreciate feedback. It's helpful.
Just struck us. Just to be clear about one other thing, because a list has appeared recently on the pavilion board giving, in larger font than before, information that was already there, 3 trustees with their phone numbers, and it's also listed 7 people as members of the management committee. Is that list, which does not include a trustee, complete, or is there still a trustee who is a member of the management committee, but you just chose not to repeat it?
Currently, there's only 3 trustees at the moment. There's not 4. We're having trouble finding, or the parish council are finding a 4th trustee.
Sorry.
So
sorry, that's not my question.
No, and a trustee attends all management committee meetings, so they are essentially the go between, the communicator between the management committee and the trust. So yes,
that is still the case.
That is still the case.
Thank you very much. That's the point I wanted to clarify. Thank you. I think I've exhausted everyone's patience by now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So Committee members, have you got any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Tree.
Sorry, yeah, that's quite all right. I have 4 questions, if I may make to the applicant. Do you accept that you currently have personal, legal and moral responsibility for the health and safety of the pavilion users and for the compliance with the terms of the licence?
Yes.
And if not, who does have that responsibility?
Well, from my understanding, yes, we do. Hence why we have to adhere to all licensing conditions.
Thank you, that's brilliant. Secondly, when you're appointed trustee, did you sign up to written terms and conditions that included specific reference to your responsibilities under the terms of the licence?
So essentially how it works, there's an interview process with the parish council, then the trustee is appointed. We then have a process that each trustee goes through to fully understand what the requirement of a trustee is. So this information would include the licensing conditions for the management committee. It would also include, I think it's EC3 or something like that, which is on the Charity Commission website, which is the roles and responsibility of a trustee. So yeah, there's a lot of literature, there's a lot of things to go through, and they sign to confirm they've understood that.
The reason for that question is that when within the last 18 months, a search was made for trustees, I asked for information and I was told that there was an application form online, but there was no terms and conditions. So that at that time, the potential trustees wouldn't even know what they were applying for.
Okay, no, thank you for that feedback. But what happens is when so it's at the point of the trustee being elected. So perhaps that's helpful feedback to have, because we could maybe show the type or even bullet point the information that a potential trustee may need to know that they'd be responsible for. So we'll take that on board. Thank you.
Oh, I think that's a very helpful. Now, the third question I have: what risk assessment has been undertaken to establish the extent of the increased risk to health and safety and disturbance if the terms of the existing licence were to be altered as per the application?
Okay, myself and Steve will probably both feedback on this, but so on the variation that we've applied for, obviously probably the only aspect you'd say that's a huge change in a way from what we're doing is the off sales, because it will just increase the area that people may be able to go with, for instance, bottles or glasses, etc. So the removal of the Annex 3 conditions, etc., is not going to pose any additional risk, because it doesn't actually change the way that we're running at the moment. So it's only really the off sales that changes the approach that we take. And we've discussed this between the management committee and trustees to assess the risk associated with having that off sale. So the way we look at it is, at the moment we have signage to ensure that people don't leave the premises with alcohol, to say this is the end of the licensed area, you can't take alcohol beyond this point. People have adhered to that for the last 18 months. It's been, to be honest, it's been very easy because people have been very receptive to us asking that. So the approach that we'll take going forward will be a similar one. Obviously, we've got the play park that's there now. So fortunately, we received grant money to build that. So it wasn't there before we had the pavilion, but so that's been added since the premises has been open. So that's fenced off. So there's a clear barrier between the play park and the field. Our proposal would be, for us, ease of management would be to put signage on the gate to say not to take bottles, cans, anything like that into that area. What we'd also do is put signage at the car park to say, please don't take alcohol beyond this point. Now, I know that they legally would be allowed to do that. If they'd say purchased it and the off sales was allowed, they could take the alcohol from the premises or into the car park and surrounding area. What we feel is that it would be better if we had that type of signage to manage it, because it would be well received by the community who live in the village, because it would limit anyone going and drinking alcohol on public highways, etc.
Can I just stop you there? This is all great, but the question was, have you done a risk assessment?
Yes, yeah, what we've done.
Or have you considered it? So that's the question.
Okay, yeah, no, sorry, no point taken.
Thank you. That's exactly my question. Was a formal risk assessment done or not?
Amongst the committee members, we
No, I'm sorry.
So
not
do you mean documented?
committee members, was a formal written risk assessment done or not?
We haven't produced documentation that we could share, but we sat down and assessed it between committee members.
Thank you. And then finally, the presentation that came through, as I say, within the last 24 hours, as far as I was concerned, could you tell me who specifically was the author of that presentation, and why was it submitted anonymously?
Okay, so you're talking about the document that summarises current licence conditions and changes?
Item 3.
So item 3 that we've referenced previously. Okay, so
pages of it. Who wrote it?
The document is produced by the trust. So
No,
please let me answer. So the document has to be agreed by all trustees, hence why when we send communication out, it's from a group email because we need to take the individuals out of that. So this documentation is reviewed and agreed by all trustees. So author is irrelevant. The author is the community trustees.
You're entitled to your view as I am. The question was, who wrote it?
The Land Waterline Community Trust.
Not who authorised it, but who wrote it?
The Land Waterline Community Trust.
Mr. Tree, Mr. Tree, I don't think there's a relevance. When you're dealing with a trust, you've got that supplementary document in front of you. You don't need to know the author as far as this is concerned.
Well, my worry was that the document was drawn up by somebody who was either not connected to the trust and certainly not here to answer questions on it.
I have the document on my laptop.
So it's done on behalf of the trust, and the trust are here to answer questions.
Thank you. I think that's the entire questions that I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I'll go back to the committee. Have you got any questions at all of the applicant?
No, at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You mentioned the temporary event notices, but as I understand it, you've never actually utilised that system to extend opening hours.
We have on, I think, a couple of occasions, definitely. So we've applied, there's been attends for the wakes, which is a community fete that was applied for. So that was more for area, so agreed. But there was a party of 18th party, I believe, or 21st in the village that extended the opening hours. So that facility has been used previously.
So, but it's not something that you had to use extensively because of demand for. So I was just wondering why you think you need the permanent extension to the opening hours or licensing hours, because there doesn't seem to be much of a need, and potentially the TENS would cover any occasions where that's required.
Okay, yeah. So on that point, fair viewpoint, but the way we're looking at it is what it allows is the flexibility of the venue to be able to host events like that if it was needed. It's not to say that we're going to extend social evenings for longer periods of time, or that we're going to have more licensable events or anything like that, because realistically we've got to assess the community that we live in as well. So we don't essentially want it to have an event, a licensed event on Monday to Sunday, because it's not going to be conducive for people living in the village. But what it will do is mean that the people who volunteer on these organisations won't have to go through the process of applying for attendance. We'll just have the ability to do that as and when we need to. So it's more for ease of running and flexibility than anything else.
Thank you.
You got. Thank you. Oh, the extension of time. Can I just ask why this length of time? An hour to an hour and a half. I mean, would you feel that a lesser time was probably appropriate, met local need?
I think, again, this was just, we looked at the time and we thought, I believe it's 12 and 12:30, them sort of manageable times, they're not antisocial. And we knew that the Everest Hall had until around 1 o'clock. So we thought we probably don't want to go as late as 1. A lot of events we have, they don't need to go on for that length of time. Again, it's just more for flexibility, but I don't think we we'd be opposed to the idea of, say, 11:30, 12. But what we wanted was just to have that flexibility, because if we did then have an event that went, say, to 12, we'd again be in the position of, do we need to apply for attendance again? It would just be that management question. So again, it's a flexibility.
Thank you.
In terms of your weekly social evenings on the Fridays, what's the sort of average attendance? What sort of numbers are we talking about attending those?
I mean, generally it can be between 10 and 30 people sort of thing down there. Sometimes it'll be a little bit more, weather dependent, with the outside with families come down, small children. So sometimes can be a little bit more. But generally I'd say 10 to 30. But personally, we want to open it for the community, whether 2 people come down or 20 people come down. It's for the people who feel they want to socialise and that. So, but that's pretty much the numbers to date.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to any other person who's made representation to the application will be given an opportunity to outline their case. Presentations will take place in the following order. Representations against. So that's Michael Tree first, then, please.
Thank you, sir. That's me. That's very kind of you. I would like to cover that as per your invitation. I'm a resident of the village and within earshot of the pavilion. I have tried to confine my items on this to items that I have experienced myself over the last 6 or 7 years since I moved to Lamborough Waterdyne. I've got a number of items that of historical importance because it reflects on the way the trust has been managed in the past, and perhaps gives us an idea how it may revert if there are major changes to the existing licence, which up to a point has proved its worth over the last 18 months or so. And the items I would like to draw your attention to, if I may, is that there has been a history of noise disturbance, sometimes acute. And there's been a very poor record of the way the complaints have been dealt with. And an avoidance of personal responsibility, but the trust doesn't have a chair, it doesn't have a treasurer, it doesn't have an administrator. Up to a point, one doesn't know who's involved. There are 3 people, but there's no allocation of specific roles there. At the previous hearing, a number of comments and undertakings were given, and those have been very disappointing, and they've turned out to be of little value. There has been consistently a failure to consult with the village residents on long-term strategic aims. We don't know what they're aiming for in the long term, how they're going to achieve it, and how it may affect us. We seem to go from one event to another without knowing where they're going in the long run, remembering, as was said, the environmental officer, that this is a very rural situation where we're having events parachuted into the village, some of which have in the past caused a huge amount of disturbance, even to residents living half a mile away in the adjoining village. And when we've taken that up with the trustees, they denied that there was any disturbance at all. How they could do that, I just do not know. And there was no, I repeat that there was no attempt to negotiate and mediate as per the advice by Mr. O'Neill. In essence, the line I'm taking is that there are ample grounds for relying on the existing terms and conditions of the licence because they worked. And I quote the American saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that is our huge worry, that if those terms and conditions are taken away, that we may revert to the situation that pertained before the license was granted. I've explained to you that I had 24 hours less to look at the submission of the applicant. I've done my best, so if there are omissions, I'm sure you'll excuse it. But the items that I'd like to mention is that in terms of first aid and training for fire evacuation, only one of the trustees, on the face of it, according to the submission, have had training in the evacuation procedure, and that is Mr. Cruz. Mr. Rogers and according to the papers that were sent to us, which showed that the qualifications were made nearly 2 years ago, and it didn't cover a lot of the members of the committee and the trustees that are there now. My summary, as far as I could see, is that in terms of first aid, there's no evidence for any of the trustees having qualified in first aid, and only one of the trustees, Mr. Cruz, had done the course on fire evacuation. Turning then to the members of the committee itself, only 3 out of 7, according to the papers that were submitted, had health and safety qualifications, and 2 of them had fire qualifications on evacuating the building. We don't know to what extent today the committee members and the trustees had actually taken the trouble to be qualified in health and safety and evacuation. And I perhaps come on to the obvious mention here, is that because it reflects on the need for health and safety, is that when people have imbibed a lot of alcohol, the results can be completely unpredictable, and hence the vital need for somebody to be in total control of the events to ensure that there isn't, to put it boldly, loss of life. We have a building here that is made of wood, and Joe Public is, as we all know, consists of people that are very estimable, people that are disabled, people who are mentally vulnerable, people in wheelchairs, people with health problems, that they're not very mobile and so on, all indicating that you need to have really tight control of the management of events. And we've seen over the last year or so, where when things go wrong, they do go wrong in unpredictable ways. Hence the need to maintain the conditions that are in the existing license for the benefit of everybody. I think in my submission, I've covered the 4 vital elements that you mentioned in terms of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children. I think all these are covered in my submission, and I don't want to amend or withdraw any of them. But I come back again to the need, as I see it, to maintain the existing terms and conditions and not water them down for issues of public safety related to a questionable history that we've had of the running of the trust. And if they can make a go of it, and I was quite impressed a minute ago when Mr. Cruz said that yes, doing terms and conditions for potential trustees to sign, this is excellent. And if that attitude to the approach of the trust to the future follows through, then, brilliant. But I would say that we don't want changes to the terms and conditions of the license. It's too early days yet. Let's see what happens. For the reasons I put in my submission, and it may be in 2-3 years to come, it could be justified, but it's far too early yet, in my view, given the sad history there's been for there to be changes.
You actually
Thank you.
quite a lot of time, and you've got.
That's plenty.
Okay.
I'm very grateful to you.
So now we'll go to Mr. Allison, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had instructions to be brief, and I'll endeavour to do so. People must have asked why are we here today? What brought us here? We have to endorse the story of past experience of extremely noisy events. These were, I believe, special events or temporary events, and it was before the licence was granted. But we are talking about doors and windows vibrating all around the house into the night, shouting and so on, and complaints from half the driveway. At that time, our attitude is we want to be quiet here. We don't want to make a fuss for people. We did not complain. But we did also hear stories about how complainants have been received. We have been informed by a number of people, and I mean, among others, 2 former trustees and a member of the management committee, that for some parties, complaints or questions are not well received and that there is an impatience and hostility. This may be false, but it seems unlikely given the sources that it is false. We were basically warned that there was, that you tread carefully. And I won't say more about that. Misleading public messages, I think we could go into great detail about, but we don't have time. I would point out that your, not only your condition 2, which you reinstated, but what you're asking for licensing hours goes against what was an agreed amendment at the time that the license application was submitted 2 years earlier. There seems to be a pattern of getting a bit at a time and then pushing the boundaries. And I will give one example of that, and that is that much was said at the original license application of the fact that the bad events that I just referred to were on the field. The field is not part of the license application. Events now are going to be inside the pavilion, so all that can be set aside. And within a matter of just a few weeks, Lambert Waterdown Parish Council, which is extremely close to the trust, nonetheless said to the trust that it would not support the trust's idea for a fresh license application to cover the whole field. So what was said at the license application was true. The license application did not have the field, but the plan to extend to the field was also true. That's a matter of record in the parish council minutes. It was not proceeded with. So the suspicion on the part of some of us that there might be an agenda, as in we want more and we'll get it in stages, but so assurances given at one point might placate people or reassure people, but look out for what happens later. That's part of the history. That's really why we became involved. On the community trusts, parish council being very close, a lot of the people involved, very understandably, have signed petitions on behalf of we think we're doing something valuable. And essentially, we're not disputing that. We are saying, and you have indeed indicated some uptake of this, that there are continuing concerns on the part of neighbours who want to just live quietly in our own homes. I should testify to the fact that even mild conversations can be heard from our property. We are more than 100 metres away, but we close our doors and windows because we don't want to eavesdrop. sound, as the environmental officer pointed out, does travel. The licence conditions were put in place 2 years ago, quote, as an appropriate and proportionate response to address the concerns of the subcommittee and objectives, and to promote the licensing objectives. And that's obviously important, but that's the case. And each site is different. If one looks at the licensing records online, some places have far more stringent conditions. Some places have no conditions. Each place is judged on its merit. We do feel that there is an element of almost envy, or the attitude is, if they have it, why can't we have it? And we feel that a far more welcome attitude on behalf of the Trust would be the conditions have been put in place relative to what is necessary on this site. And as I say, we ourselves are not saying that all these conditions must be maintained. Our concerns are really over conditions 1 and 2, speaking for my wife and myself. And if you, as I think you can, say the conditions are in place, things are running well with the conditions in place, and we are complying with them because we want to do things right and to show we're doing things right in the interest of public welfare, I think that would be a great message. And so for condition C1, some points have already been made by people who have far more weight in this than I do. We don't see that the case has been made at all strongly. The temporary event notices, of course, if you had more flexibility, the hours could go as late as anything. But in terms of likely need and frequent use, it doesn't seem that it would matter very much if the hours were not extended to the extent you're asking for. And in terms of parity with Everest Hall or any other village hall, well, first of all, it's still not the same hours for reasons which you've very sensibly outlined. And it doesn't seem to be a very strong reason. So we do feel that at the very least, you look at the hours that you asked for 2 years ago by agreement before you came to the board, and possibly look at the existing hours and say, why do they need to be changed? Very few people, it seems, stay on late. Very few events run late. Condition 2, we're delighted that you're keeping. And I think, if you just give me a moment, because so much of what I want to say has been superseded by various things, there has been a feeling that the Trust does still seek to push boundaries, and that people who are objectors tend to be isolated. There are some sorry stories about that I don't have time to tell. I did have one unpleasant phone call myself on this occasion, not, I emphasise, from any of you or from the management committee, but from a third party, basically saying, putting it crudely, you don't understand anything about anything. Why are you getting involved? Why you should just shut up. If you have anything to say, you should contact Mr. Nola, who is the chairman of the Trust, which is factually incorrect, as we both know. And Mr. Nola knows nothing about this. I'm quite sure you don't. But the point is that there is that undercurrent of unpleasantness. I'm not sure that my wife and myself would be comfortable coming to a parish council meeting in the pavilion to discuss with what is clearly the dominant group in the village, both in terms of numbers. A word about numbers: the petition, 61 names. A lot are connected to the group that runs it, and I think we've said that. And the supporting letters, 8 were. One comes from the management committee, 1 from the parish council, and 8 others connected to the same group. We know who the dominant forces in the village are. We know how our own earlier attempts to encourage the parish council perhaps to adopt the role of critical friend rather than uncritical ally were noted, and that was all that happened to them. And basically, the parish council, in our view, was unreceptive and uninterested in the concerns, which were not isolated. I'm being advised to stick to the point. We think the onus is on the applicant to justify the changes in the licence. For several of these changes, it's entirely outside our remit, and if some of these duties about, I think Mr. Tree takes a wider view on this, but as far as we're concerned, it's condition 1, extending the licensing hours or keeping the licensing hours as they are, is pretty important. Condition 2, which you've kept, is important, and following a rather complex explanation, which I'm still not sure I've quite understood, but the arrangement for the off sales to be put into place in a manner which restricts the area and the time in which alcohol will be consumed, in spite of the general fact that alcohol bought from off sales generally can be just taken away and do it anywhere. That would need looking at very carefully. And if I can mention the fact that the minor amendment in April 2021 came about because of a discrepancy between the visual plan shown at the thing and the words put into the text, and that discrepancy was resolved in favour of expanding the area to encompass the whole terrace. As a practical person, I can see why that might have been sensible. Nonetheless, the committee saw one thing, so there needs to be great care over any arrangement on this off sales, as indeed Mr. O'Neill has very popularly emphasised to you. We would like to thank the management committee for a number of things it's did. I think one of your things mentioned that there had been thanks for the circular about the fireworks. That came from us. You may have had more, but we certainly said we were grateful for that. We feel that the management of events, as far as we can tell from outside, has been pretty good. I mean, we've not had serious disturbance over the last few years. There have been one or two things. Anyone? Essentially, I think what we're saying is that if we can keep condition 1, because really the arguments for removing it are not convincing, or because, yes, one of our key points is we need explicit safeguards, and the reason for that is that however responsible and sensible the management committee is at any one time, things do change, sometimes rapidly over time. We have documented some of those changes in the past in terms of what was said and then what was being done later. And something which actually underpins assurances of the type that you're giving, obviously in good faith now, would be prudent for the future. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Thank you, Mrs. Allison, for doing a better job of chairing the longer than I was. So, representations of support then for Zoe Cruz.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Zoe. I'm here as a resident of Waterstein, but I'm also a member of the management committee. I've got 2 very young children and can fully appreciate what a safe environment the pavilion provides for future generations. I am currently the committee member that holds the personal licence as per one of the Annex 3 conditions, and I obtained this purely for this reason. At the end of 2022, I gave my notice of resignation from the committee due to personal and work-related reasons, which instigated the need for either a new committee member with a personal licence or this variation. As it stands, I am still on the committee waiting for this outcome to be resolved. I'm in full support of this variation and can see firsthand that the removal of these conditions and variation to the hours and area will make the running and management of the committee much easier for the current committee member and future volunteers. We've gone above and beyond over the past 18 months to ensure that the licence has been adhered to and that the immediate properties would not be affected by any events held at the pavilion. And I hope that the subcommittee and Shropshire Council can grant this variation request in full.
Very succinct. Thank you very much. Roy Lloyd.
I represent Waterstein Parish Council, which supports community activities across the parish for the benefit of residents. We're lucky to have a proactive team of volunteers acting, among other things, as trustees and as members of the Pavilion Management Committee. The pavilion is efficiently run and has a proven track record. The removal of the Annex 3 condition would help volunteers simply administrated and would reduce costs incurred by the community trust. Similar conditions do not appear to impose on other organisations, for example, village halls or clubs. The pavilion is a recreational benefit to the community. Approving this licence variation will be a benefit to all and may encourage for more residents to volunteer. The parish council is in full support of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have an opportunity to ask any relevant questions of those who've made representations. And the order that I'll take questions is licensing officer, applicant and committee. So sorry, licensing.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify something in relation to the field that keeps getting mentioned. I don't know whether the applicant mentioned it. Is the field owned by Glanford Waterstone Trust, or is it a field that's owned by the local council?
So it's trustee owned. It was there's a woman called Jane Adams who left it to the trust. So it's under our management, but it's a community field for public use, if that makes sense.
So if a member of the public was there now, have they got access to that land?
If they were there now, yeah,
You just walk in.
yeah, people walk dogs, they play football, they use the park, etc.
Okay, thank you.
But sorry, can I just ask a question on that rather than?
Yeah.
Could the trustees, if they own the land, say to any person who's walking on it, sorry, I no longer want you to come? So in other words, could bar them from the land, or is it public accessible land?
We'll have to completely confirm it. From my understanding is that it is public land, so anyone could go on it. We can't necessarily bar them. I guess we'd have to go through some form of, if there was a reason to bar, for instance, I guess we'd have to contact the necessary authorities to do that. But it is a trust-owned piece of land, but it is accessible for the whole public. The reason Jane Adams left it was for that reason, for the whole community.
The reason why I ask, because it comes into whether you can control the people that come on and what they drink. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I can comment on that by way of helping. I believe the legal position, I'm a land agent, is that it is a private field owned by a charitable trust, and it is up to the charitable trust, and they have the freedom to run it as they see fit in accordance with the terms of the charity, and that it is not designated as a public open space like a common or likewise. It is their building, they are the legal owners, and they are entitled to run it as they see fit in accordance with the terms of the charity.
Thank you, Mr. Tree, for, I would like to say clarity, but we've got to take your word for it.
Yeah, maybe I haven't been clear enough with how I explained it, but Mr. Tree's sort of correct to the point of us owning it and seeing as using it as we see fit. So I guess on that point, the way we see fit is that anyone can use it and anyone can benefit from it. So to that point,
that's your decision,
and that's what's written in our policies and procedures to allow that to happen. I guess we'd have to change them to manage that.
Okay, thank you. Back to the licensing officer.
Yeah, thanks for that clarity. What I'm trying to get at is if you were having an event, say bowls, you've got your licence, obviously bowls, which is not part of the red line, and I turned up as an individual with children and other adults and access to land with alcohol, what would you do about that, or what could you do about it?
I think the approach that we've always taken, perhaps we've been fortunate that we're in a rural area and don't tend to have any crime or antisocial behaviour that happens. So not that would be antisocial, but what we tend to do is just manage it as we see fit. So situational. So if someone come on and was causing a disturbance, it's highly likely that whoever a responsible person was at that event would probably go and have a word and say, look, obviously this has been booked out for an event. So completely appreciate it's a public space, but obviously if you could just be mindful of what's going on, nothing wrong with you being here if you're causing no issue. And that's tend to be what's happened in the past. We've had children's birthday parties, they've been playing football and someone's turned up to play balls because the balls pitch is there. So we've kind of gone down the line that's not harming the birthday party, the playing of football. We just said, obviously, this is booked out for a party, so just be mindful. Some people go, okay, no worries, we'll come back another time. It's here all the time, so that tends to be the approach we take.
Okay. And then the actual building and the terrace, is that classed as the fields, and is the field classed as the bowls court, or where's the kind of separation?
So really, the pavilion and the terrace is seen as the venue.
Okay.
The balls pitch, the play park, the bike track, the goal was the field. That's the community field as we see it. So anyone could come and use that.
Okay, so we go back to the start of the hearing when I've explained to the subcommittee about having a blue hatched area. That blue hatched area that you would put on the plan potentially would have members of the public accessing it as well, which you couldn't control from that event.
There's a possibility of it, which is why, obviously, like you were saying, if we were to have a blue hatched area, if that was to become, if we didn't have the off sales, for instance, and that was to become it, we'd have to fence it off probably and have that as part of the premises, which realistically we don't want to do because it limits the amount of area that people who come and walk their dogs or play football will have. Hence, we actually spoke to Ross about the way that what would be the best way to manage it, you know, what options are there, and we just thought that the off sales is the most manageable one because we can kind of manage people who attend it. We vet all the people who actually make bookings. The only routine licensable activity we have is on the Friday night. A lot of those are local people who understand what we're trying to do. So from that perspective, I think off sales in that instance would be really easy to manage with the people that attend. Obviously, that's why we don't accept. But say someone was going to have a, you know, outside of the parish, going to have an 18th birthday party. We didn't know, and hundreds of people were coming. We know we couldn't manage it, so we just wouldn't accept the booking. So and that's why I think the off sales is probably more suitable because the type of events that we're going to have.
So just to clarify, you think the original application is best suited rather than your kind of plan B?
Yeah, I would say it is in order alphabetically that we'd prefer option A, but obviously from feedback and speaking to people, we're not opposed to the idea of option B.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions for Mr. Tree and Mr. Allison as well, so that's okay. Mr. Tree first. I've got made some notes on here about the concern originally before the application was made. I think it's just more for clarity, really. I think I've understood it, but can you clarify that the premises wasn't run correctly or appropriately before the licence was granted, but since they've had a premises licence, they have been running it to a good standard?
Yes, I think that is correct. As far as I'm personally concerned, since the licence was granted, I haven't had any disturbance. I've been aware of the teething troubles, and I've heard those, but by and large, the awful problems that we had in the past haven't recurred since the licence was granted, which is why I've been taking the line that the licence does work. And I would hate it for my own personal reason for things to regress to the state that it was before the licence was granted, because we had a very difficult time then. I won't go into it, but I will if you want me to give more details as to why it was very difficult. And I personally felt I'd been abused when I had raised comments. But looking forward, I'm hopeful, I think as everybody else is, that what had happened over the last 18 months, which, as I say, apart from teething troubles, I got no complaints. Yeah. And if that continues, well then fantastic. But the whole thing is underpinned by the existing licence. And I said earlier, it may well be that in 2 or 3 years or whatever, that there will be compelling reasons to alter the licence, which I don't think there are compelling reasons now for the reasons I said. It's early days, let the wretched things settle down and all have a bit of fun with living and operating in Lambeth, which is really what it's all about.
Thank you. Mr. Allison, I just want to clarify as well that 7 conditions in annex 4. Again, I think I've got the point, but you're asking for condition 1 to remain, and condition 2 has been asked to be remained by public protection. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you're now not opposed to retain. Is that correct?
4, 5, 6, and 7, we were never particularly opposed to because it was entirely outside our remit, which was concern over noise nuisance. Condition 3, we've never quite understood how it's meant to work in practice. I think the idea was that there was somebody contactable in the event that there was a problem with noise nuisance. And provided some sort of arrangement is in place for that, we don't have a problem with condition 3 being refocused, and clearly the new condition does provide for somebody to be in place on the event. So conditions 1 and 2 are what concern us, and the implications of off sales and how it has worked out with the potential for the field. If I could just slightly modify what Mr. Tree said, the very bad noise events came from the site, the field, at a time when the premises were still being completed. The pavilion was being built, I believe, but it wasn't quite completed. I'm not aware of any really bad events from the pavilion itself at all. So when things stay inside, good. If things get out onto the field based on past precedent, they can get out of hand, and they have in the past got out of hand. That's the concern.
Okay, so it's more of the building noise initially that's caused the concern of the community.
I'm sorry?
It's more of the building noise issue in the first place.
No.
Oh, sorry.
No. There was a very noisy event on the community field. Mr. Tree was asked about noise from the premises before the license was granted. I'm not aware of any bad noise. If by the premises you mean the pavilion, I'm not aware of any bad noise from the pavilion itself at any time. But from the field, when the pavilion was under construction and there was a local event which went on in late into the night with noise, that was the problem.
I understand now. So the whole pavilion was built, there was an event in the field prior to the premises license being granted, that was a noise.
So it wasn't actually the premises. Yeah,
thank you. No more questions, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll move to the applicant. If you've got any questions of any of the representatives that were made.
I mean, they are kind of questions. I'll stick them to questions now. I know the forum works, but probably to what was shared by Mr. Tree on consultation. So the points taken on that, on how that needs to develop. But we do have the website events notice board. We do everything within our mission statement. Although we are rural and isolated, you know, obviously we're aware of noise, hence why we vet the people who book the venue. So sort of just briefly going over your points, we did send a letter. Maybe that was received late, we're not sure. We also sent an email. We did also share the supporting document. I think it was over a week before this actual hearing. So if it hasn't been shared with you before then, we appreciate that. So take that on board. Maybe we had a slight confusion about what we were meant to do in the interim, which is our fault. We weren't sure whether we were meant to approach you and talk in that forum. So that feedback is taken on board as well. But from a question point of view, I'd just like to confirm the really noisy event that happened, was that the wedding that was held on the pavilion field, or was that the wakes?
No, there were 3 events.
Okay.
Prior to the grant of the license. Each one of them were very noisy, and each one of them were occupying the field under no terms and conditions. In effect, the trustees said, take it over and do as you please. And they did as they were pleased. And loudspeakers, I put it in my submission, were pointed up to the heart of the village. The noise was atrocious going up to the early hours of the morning.
Mr. Tree, you did put that in the submission.
Yeah.
We have heard that.
Yeah.
And we're on about the amendment or
Thank you.
what's
My
required
apologies.
license now. So
Yeah.
I've just got to move it on a little
Yes,
bit.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification on what those events were, but that's fine.
And committee members, any questions?
So myself,
Yeah, Councillor Michael Shirehall. Gentleman at the end, did you say you're from the parish council?
Yeah.
What exactly is the relationship? Do you have any oversight of the trust and the use of the pavilion and the field, or are you completely separate and it's entirely up to them? What's the exact sort of relationship there?
Well, I'm in the parish council. Obviously I do go there as an associate, as a resident of the parish.
No, I'm just asking, does the council as a body have any control over the trust? What's the sort of...
Yeah, we appoint trustees.
Yeah, we appoint trustees, yeah.
So if there are any, if residents have problems with the way it's being run and managed, they could theoretically come to the council.
Yes.
And that could be a route of reconciliation and sorting out complaints potentially. That would be the first step.
No.
Well, if I may, I did take this up with the council some years ago.
It's going to be brief.
The answer is that the council disclaim responsibility for the running of the trust. Their sole responsibility is to appoint 4 of the trustees. That is, I understand it. And when I went to the council some years ago, they said, no, the running of the trust is down to the trustees, and our own sole role is to appoint 4 of the 5 trustees.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tree.
Yeah, I'm just confused as to why there is that right of the council to appoint the trustees and what responsibility the parish council has over the trust and over the running and the management of the facility. I just wanted clarification on that. Yeah, maybe.
I can perhaps add, not complete clarity, but at least some more. So we're a CIO, is how we operate as a trust, so charitable incorporated organisation. Yes, the trustees are appointed by the parish council by interview process. So the parish council clearly can be contacted. The reason that they point people back in the direction of the trust is because in our constitution, etc., the way we run, we have policies to deal with different types of events, complaints, etc. So we follow our complaints process. So probably the reason the parish council pointed people back towards us was for us to duly follow that complaints procedure. From my understanding as well, if there has been occasions years and years ago that maybe trustees have stepped down or been asked to leave post. So the parish council would obviously need to be notified of that in order to then advertise and allocate another trustee. So they would have some responsibility in ensuring we're of our full complement, and they're more than allowed to have the feedback on the trust and then share that information with us. But we should follow our processes internally as a CIO to deal with anything that's raised.
So does the council have the ability to remove trustees? If someone wasn't happy with the way the trustees handled the complaints procedure, would the parish council be the next responsible body? Or and if all the trust members and all the committee resign tomorrow, would the parish council then take over the running and the responsibility?
Funny enough, we actually had the conversation when we're getting low in number. We had the conversation of what are next steps. From my understanding, the parish council could essentially consume the trust and take that on as another arm to what they do as an organisation. Hopefully that doesn't happen because we've got quite a lot of things we need to do. And they help us try and find trustees. So that probably answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Towers.
Yes, I'm just reflecting on what I've heard. So the parish council have no financial involvement with the trust at all. There's no granting or supporting. There's no link.
Not from the parish council to the trust, no. But for instance, the trust as a charity, for instance, like the Jubilee, the parish council wanted to buy cups for children within the parish, so they applied to us for a grant. So we can then obviously apply, but it would never happen the other way around.
I understand. Thank you. I'm just thinking of alternative ways to modifying the licence like you are applying for. There's temporary events notices. How many have you been asked for up to this point?
So we've had one for Lambeth Wakes, which is a community fete essentially. We had one for a 21st birthday party. We had one for a naming ceremony. And then there's a possibility of another coming up. We haven't applied for it, but there's a possibility of another one coming up in February, March time, but that's not confirmed. So 3 to date, over 18 months. So obviously completely appreciate that, say it's not a large volume of tends to apply for, but what needs to happen is obviously someone needs to do that. We are a voluntary organisation, and a lot of people in full-time employment, got young children, etc. So what we're trying to do is just make that easier, so that when people leave the management committee, leave the trust, and are replaced by someone, that it's easy for the person that's coming in. There's no other intent other than that.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Each party will now be permitted a brief opportunity to make any closing remarks. This should not be a repeat of the case already made or discussions during the questions. But you may have some points to clarify or additional comments as a result of the questions and discussion. If you have nothing further to say, you do not have to speak. So, licensing officer first, please.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to re-emphasise what you're here today for. So it's to consider and determine the application. To do this, you must give appropriate weight to the steps that are necessary to meet the 4 licence objectives, any representations of supporting information, the 182 guidance, the Licence Act 2003 and Shropshire Council's licensing policy 2019 to 2024. You then may refuse to grant the licence, the application, or grant the application with or without conditions in full or in part. Your decision must be justified and provide supporting evidence after it's all involved, and the decision can be appealed within 21 days of persons receiving the notice. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Allison?
I think we've covered most of the points, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to reiterate that one detail, you mentioned a temporary event for the wakes. That probably isn't related to the extension of hours late into the night, but to other matters.
This isn't a question.
No,
sorry.
Be
that as it may, I thought there was a moment to clarify things. Sorry. Essentially, we'd say that there's no shame in having licensing conditions. They've been put in place for a reason. I think, to reiterate, you can take pride, and you should take pride, in the way in which you've managed the place scrupulously within the conditions. If some of these conditions can meaningfully be set aside because they're no longer needed for other reasons, then great. And if we can keep conditions 1 and 2 in place, we'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tree.
No, I have nothing further. Thank you very much.
Anybody from the supporting representation? No. Okay then. So the applicant.
Very brief. I think really we just want to be able to run the venue as easily as possible amongst the management committee and the trustees. Thank you obviously for raising the points you have today, and we'll take the feedback on board. But I think what would be more conducive longer term is if we could meet within the village, in the pavilion, in the Everest Hall, at your houses, whatever suits you better, and we could discuss things. If you're not happy with how anything is going, it's far easier to discuss amongst ourselves and come to a good and fair assessment of it, and put things in place and work as a community. That's what we're trying to do, and I hope you can see that we're just trying to make our lives easier.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And are there any points of clarification the solicitor would like to make?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Well, thanks everybody for attending. We will now withdraw to deliberate and make a decision. The hearing will close and you can leave the meeting. All interested parties will be advised of the decision in writing within 5 days of this hearing. The decision will be sent to you in the same way you communicated with the licensing team prior to the hearing. E.g., if you emailed your representation to the application, you will receive a decision by email. Any party who feels aggrieved by the decision of the committee has the right to appeal to the Magistrates' Court. This appeal must be made in writing to staff of the Magistrates' Court within 21 days of the notice being received. And thank you all again for your patience. Thank you.